first step to putting together your synthesis organizer is to identify your driving question. You should already have this from the assignment sheet, but for today's purposes, we're going to keep working off of the situation that we used to talk about inferences in class. And our driving question is going to be, why is my teacher in a bad mood today? When you pick out the keywords, you really want to focus on the big words in the driving question so that you're not getting those smaller auxiliary words that don't really matter that much. I picked out teacher, the subject, bad mood, my object, and today, which was more the circumstances. And that should be sufficient for my search. Now, I don't have a Google search. What I would do is I would get my sources from articles and then I would type a URL into each source section. However, for today, I am just going to talk about maybe a student account or a teacher's account of why my teacher is in a bad mood. And that would be my research, my sources. It might be helpful for you as well to put in the author name, organization, or any other details that might help you later in your drafting. So I'm going to go ahead and label these student account 1, student account 2, and then I'm going to throw in a teacher account. You will need to have 5 sources for this paper. I am just going to model at a lower level for simplicity's sake. So let's say that you're researching and these different accounts are essentially the different articles that you're finding online. So this first student gave me 3 pieces of evidence and I'm just going to record them here. I'm going to put them in quotation marks and write down exactly what they said. So I have different reasons why I'm picking out, or different reasons why this student said that your teacher might be in a bad mood. Their hair was dripping wet, her glasses were cracked, and her clothes were soaked through. As I move to my next source, I do the exact same thing. I pull out direct text evidence, and it's the evidence that's always relevant to that driving question, right? So here are 3 more pieces that might be relevant. Her shoes were muddy, she had a bruise on her arm, and her knees were scratched up and her skirt was torn. And my last account, or my last piece of research, she didn't get to sleep last night, according to this other teacher, and the teachers also have grades due. So those are 2 things that may be contributing to that bad mood. Next up, we are actually starting the process of synthesizing. So we are looking for connections between topics. So the first connection I'm seeing is water. I am seeing that we have dripping wet hair, soaked through clothes, muddy shoes. So the connection I see is that they're all wet, right? So I'm going to label that as my pink connection. And I'm going to put that down under number 3. It doesn't have to be a complete sentence yet. You can put that if that's easier for you, but don't feel like you have to have a really complete thought at this point. As I look among those pieces of evidence again, the next pattern that I see is some sort of like damage. So I see the cracked glasses, I see the bruise, I see her scrapes, her torn skirt. So I'm going to put those all together, and I think I'm going to put that there's some sort of impact that she had. I think that adequately describes the damage for right now, and then I can elaborate on what I might conclude from that later. So because I don't have a lot of pieces of evidence left, I'm going to take those last 2 and categorize them in the same place. And I'm seeing that there's probably some stress that's aligned with that. So I am going to say that that is related to stress or discomfort. And if I'm looking at the impact, or maybe even the fact that this teacher is wet, that might also relate to discomfort. So I'm thinking that I might be able to also use an inference I've already made as a piece of evidence, or maybe a premise for my subclaim. This is what we call a building argument, if you're using those previous inferences that you've already established to further your argument, then you're building on top of it. Next, you'll see that I am putting those different categories into the topic name. So I'm just elaborating on that, and I'm going to reorganize all of my notes around these. So I am just copying and pasting all of those different colors into their correct category so that I can look at those at the same time and really be able to look at them as a cluster and say, what can I infer from this? How can I look at my thoughts based on this evidence and make a comprehensive, good argument? Next up, we are going to conduct further research, but only if necessary. At this point, I don't think that I need to conduct any more research to probably get to an answer to my driving question, so I am going to leave that be. Next, we are going to look at the actual argument. We're going to build our body paragraphs. So you can look at these premises as pieces of evidence, right? It's just that data that we have already cited, already pulled. I'm going to transfer down all those pink pieces of data, or the three most important points, if I am working with more than three pieces, down to that section there. But definitely add more evidence, more sections, if you do want more than three pieces of evidence, which is totally appropriate for an argument essay, especially of the complexity that we are writing now. So once I look at those pieces of evidence together, I want to think, what can I infer? What subclaim can I create from these pieces of evidence, right? That's just the conclusion that I get from the premises. So I am going to infer that it's raining outside. The day is really dreary. I don't have to go super far with this yet, but I know that this is how my evidences connect, and this subclaim is what connects the evidence to, more importantly, my driving question, and it's going to help me answer my driving question later. So I am just going to continue this process with each of the sets of evidence, each of the topics that I've already picked out. Now I'm thinking about this last conclusion, and I remember that I've already kind of established a pattern within my first two subclaims or conclusions, right? If I fell on the way to school and it's raining outside, that's a lot of discomfort, and I think that discomfort or stress can definitely apply to that third conclusion. So although that's not a direct piece of evidence that I have, I know that the inference that I've already made could potentially be a supporting reasoning, a supporting line of reasoning for a subclaim that I discuss in my paper. So ultimately, we are going to come up with our thesis from these three conclusions, just like we did from the evidence to the conclusion. And there you go. We have our teacher is in a bad mood with three reasons why.